Namaste. Welcome to episode 6 of Vichasthal. Now, before we begin the session today, I want to tell you all that it has been raining crazy here in Hyderabad since yesterday. And I'm extremely sorry in case we face some Wi Fi issues, and because of which, if there are some disturbances in between, so I would like to apologize in advance for that. Um, Today's episode is on a topic which I believe is extremely important in today's times. In the last few months, especially, we have seen a lot of conversations around this on social media, where people, have expressed what they understand about it. And also, there are many who want to support, who want to help, but they don't know, what is the right way to do it. So I thought that it is very important to have a episode in Vichasthal on the topic of mental health, because I think that if we truly want to create an ecosystem and infrastructure in India, which is very supportive, which we don't have that right now. I think there is some way to go. So I think it's essential that we all understand mental health for what it is. We understand that how we can reach out for help, how we can support somebody who may need any kind of help. And today I have with me someone who can give us really, I think, insightful guidance on this topic. So let me get her on stream. Hello, ma'am. Rajeshwari Luthar is here with us today to talk on mental health. Welcome to Vichasthal.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I'll just introduce ma'am for you all. So Mrs. Rajeshwari Luthar holds an international certification for addiction professionals, PGD HRM, and a graduate from Delhi University. She is a Pearson qualified Cogmet coach to deliver Cogmet training program. She is also trained in addiction therapy from Hazelden, Minnesota, USA, certified psychometric test professional, denial management from the CENAPS Foundation, and is a certified lead auditor ISO systems from Cranfield University. Mrs. Luthar is the director and co-founder at Hope Trust, Asia's premier institute for addiction and treatments, with over 18 years experience in counseling. She specializes in addiction counseling and relationship counseling and family therapy. She also gives talks and conducts workshops on various topics for corporate, schools, and institutions. She also is actively involved in community sensitization programs on different topics. So thank you once again for joining us today. And ma'am, I think I would like to begin with, the idea, because the tagline of this show is your ideation, our inspiration. So I want to know that what really, got you interested in the human mind, human behavior, and how did you establish Hope Trust and why? What was the vision?
So, thank you, Anupama, for having me on the show. So, yeah, that's a very interesting question, because I think as a child, I have always been interested to understand and observe people, and somehow I could relate to people. And, I used to feel that I have an insight of how somebody is going to behave or what they are thinking. So it was very uncanny, because I always like to observe them very keenly on what they're going to say and take a feedback. And as I grew up, mental health in our times were not so popular because it was such a taboo. But I know one thing is, I wanted to work with people. I wanted to be of help to people in the area where I can talk to people. And that's how I started. And as I grew up, once I did my sociology and my psychology, it made a lot of sense to me that, of course, there are many streams where I can use my profession, but I felt that in the area of mental health, I can reach out to people better because I feel I can relate to them. Coming to your question of Hope Trust, Hope Trust primarily deals with addiction and substance use issues and addiction to various disorders. However, my own personal life has been touched by close family members' association with addiction. So that's how Hope Trust was founded 19 years back, and so I can relate to the subject very well. Also, we felt that in India there were rehabs, but they're very notorious because we always thought places for treatment for addiction were lockdown places where you are kept. Many places unfortunately were like that. There were very few places which were using evidence based approaches. So we wanted to bring in a very new thinking, using all the principles, using all the latest strategies around the world. And I trained at Hazelden primarily for this because I wanted to know what's happening the latest around the world. So no longer we are looking at addiction like a moral shortcoming. So
Hmm.
we treat it as a disease. So then we have to be equipped with the tools. And slowly, from addiction, we realized that while we deal with an addict, we are also dealing with family, we are also dealing with children, and we are also
Right.
finding comorbid issues, anxiety, and depression. So, Hoptra slowly evolved from just being a primary addiction treatment center, which still remains our primary focus, to a mental health institute where we are there to reach out on other mental health issues to people and making it more acceptable.
Right, right. That's wonderful. And I think you made a very valid point there about, how the family eventually does get affected. Whatever, I mean, of course, the patient definitely goes through a lot, but then there's a different kind of an impact on the family. So now, I think before we talk about the taboo of mental health, I wanted to talk about the taboo of counselors as well. I'm sure because you've been into this for years. And I have heard this a lot of times where people feel that counselors to kuch nahi bas gyan dete hain. I mean, there is I mean, while of course few people do value what counselors do, but then there is a section of people who have that kind of mindset. So was it ever challenging in your career as a counselor, like, whether did you come across such kind of myths maybe, or certain, the stereotypes related to counselors? And how do you then generally, like, suppose there's somebody who comes to you with that kind of an attitude, maybe, the family pushed the person, but the person may be having that kind of an attitude. So how do you deal with such challenges, when you're interacting with people?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. And while at the outset, I would like to clarify that
Hmm.
counseling for addiction and counseling for other mental disorders or mental health challenges, like every challenge is not a disorder, is slightly different because addiction is requires a little bit of confrontationist questioning because the denial is very strong. So if I have to separate my experience in both the areas, if I have to speak about addiction, yes, because most patients are not willing for treatment. And but we as an institution have
Hmm.
always believed that, we do not want to take involuntary admissions because after all, it's not me who wants to the patient to be okay only. I mean, it's primarily the family. So as long as the family doesn't convince the person or there is not enough motivation created.
Right.
Having said that, I also realize that most patients do not come willingly because that is the nature of the disease.
Hmm.
So, and sometimes patients come to us and they're brought to us only because there is a crisis in the family and the family just wants to, make sure that, that temporary period is taken care of.
Right. Right.
Because there is so much of guilt, and most families actually take a long time to even accept the person as a problem. And if they have brought the person to a rehab center or to a mental health specialist, that itself means that they have tried every other method and they have reached some kind of a rock bottom. So in most cases, the families reach the rock bottom before the patient reaches the rock bottom. Now,
Hmm.
having done that, the challenges you mentioned are also coming from the traditional mindset related to mental health, because mental
Hmm.
health is, considered to be a taboo to talk about, and most
Right.
people are in denial about mental health. So I always tell them that look, the brain is the most important part of your organ, sorry, a body, and
Hmm.
that is why it is placed on top of the body. It must be given that
Right.
kind of an importance. So why are you denying the right to treatment or right to good health? So because traditionally we feel that if somebody acknowledges that they have a mental health issue, they will be stigmatized, and that is a huge stigma that, oh, if you have an issue, then at least you acknowledge there is an issue. So mental health has been an issue for a donkey's years. It's not like this is something new.
Right.
But
Agree.
we are like traditionally made ki what difference it makes, you can just talk to each other and get over with it. You should learn to sort it out with each other, or you have to put up with the person because they are so close to you. But when you have diabetes or you have heart disease, you don't do that, right? You make an effort to take the person to a doctor. Then why don't we accept that in mental health? Because if the mental health of a person is affected, whether it is long term, short term, or it's a trigger or some childhood experiences, it definitely has an impact on everything. So yes, and even in addiction, when families bring the patients to us, they are like saying, "Hey, just get him to stop or her to stop to drink, and everything will get okay. With love and affection, will cure." So many a times, even if the patient's denial is broken, the family's denial is not broken. So as a
Hmm.
counselor, the challenge is how do you convince them that this is a process, it's not an event. That is in addiction. In mental health, even otherwise, considering the lifestyle issues we are dealing with, there are many issues. Like, depression is very common, anxiety has become a very common thing. Post COVID, we are getting lot of mental health issues which are coming out. So, and
Right.
it has also been a trigger. So people come to us, but there is a lot of reluctance because they feel that if even if I have to acknowledge to you that I have a mental health issue or I'm feeling anxious, so they feel that there's something wrong with me or I'm not adequate. But
Yes.
as we know that lately, a lot of people, prominent people are coming out, and mental health has been an issue for a long time. It is only getting worse. And I think sometimes, even if the patient gets into treatment, the families are a bigger challenge because they feel the problem only lies with the client and we don't have anything to do. But many a times, the families can not only contribute to the problem, but they can also contribute to the solution.
Yes.
So, reaching out to a professional is something which is like not yet, it is at least in the urban community, a lot of people are reaching out. But one, the lack of awareness that mental health issues are real, and counseling is not just talking to each other like you talk to a friend. There is an evidence based approach. There are people who are trained in dealing with mental health. So that kind of an awareness is slowly reaching out to people. So, and then the compliance. The third point is compliance. Many a times the dropout rate of people from counseling is also very high because they feel ki bhai, what is there? It's only about talking. Why don't they give any medication? See, every mental health challenge doesn't require a medication. Medication is only given when it starts affecting physically in worse forms, and then that's a psychiatrist who has to get into the picture. And having said that, I bring to the last point is a lot of people would at least manage to come up to the psychologist, but they're very scared to go to a psychiatrist because they are
Yeah.
scared that will be put on medication, and that is like the worst thing that can happen to us.
True, true, very true, and we hear that all the time. So yes, that's so true. Um, so I think one of the viewers also agrees. So Aarti Khatwani Bhatia says, thoughtfully presented, approaching a counselor is still either looked down upon or mocked at. Yes, that's true, Aarti. And I would also like to tell our viewers that if you have any questions related to mental health counseling, it could be a question, or even if you want to share something, please feel free to do so in the comments, and I will take them up as time permits during the discussion. So, of course, we spoke about the taboo, like with respect to approaching counselors and with respect to even acknowledging the need for therapy. uh, so what, like whenever I talk to somebody about mental health, what I've seen is that sometimes even the understanding of mental health is very limited. Like either people will be like pagal thodi hai, say for example, or they think depression, somehow mental health is always thought of as depression, whereas that is just one of the things. I mean, as you were also mentioning that mental health issues could be a lot of things. Even in depression, I would believe that there is a spectrum, right, with respect to the severity maybe. So I wanted you to explain a little bit about like what really do we mean when we say mental health or mental health issue, because I think a lot of us, like I say, we have a very layman understanding. And the reason I'm asking this is because normally we all are trained in first aid, right? Like if something happens, you should know at least basics. So I think it's very important for also, that this is, I feel something like a first aid for mental health, that, at least we know what exactly do we mean when we say mental health issues. It's not just depression or, some kind of an insanity. So yeah, if you could throw some light on that.
So, see, every mental health illness, as I said, is not a disorder.
Yeah.
Sometimes it can be transient, it can be by a trigger like loss of a close person or a loved one. And it can be but basically, it becomes an illness or a disorder when it starts affecting your functionality. It starts affecting your daily life in a way that you're not able to handle it, you're not able to control it,
Right.
and
Right.
your best efforts, the methods you familiar with, they are not able to help you, and even your family is not able to help you. That is the time when we need to reach out. So, but having said that, there will be many mental health issues which are genetic in origin. Not everything is acquired or because of environment. Some of them may be genetic in origin, like many bipolar disorders or schizophrenia, even anxiety disorder. In some case, maybe genetically predisposition, it runs in the family. So what we have to do as a counselor is, that is why we spend a lot of time initially to understand the person and do an assessment. And one of the important aspects of assessment is family assessment. So many people, sometimes I get these cases when I say, talk about yourself, and then they start talking about the problem, and then I say, before we get into that, let's spend some time understanding what kind of family you come from. So then, when we start exploring the family dynamics or history, they may not know exactly that there is a problem in the family, but they may,
Right.
share certain symptoms or behaviors. So it gives us an idea about, what we are looking at a larger picture. So there are many things like anxiety disorders, eating, a lot of addiction. Like addiction runs many a times in a family. And today there is a recent study by NIMANS which says that 1 in 10 people in India, they suffer from mental health issues, and 1 in 20 suffer from depression. So it's not like we are talking about something which is happening on Mars or Jupiter. We are seeing it right now. And COVID has thrown open such a big door, and there were mental health issues which were hidden under functionality, and those are coming out because we are not equipped to deal with the pandemic. And even now, people who do not have mental health issues are facing the stress. So imagine people who have a propensity to suffer from mental health, how difficult it would be for them. And many a times, therapy sometimes alone will not work in such a problem. We sometimes will have to take a medical help, like I'm talking about medication. And it is not that every medication we take, we have to take it lifelong. I know that is like the biggest fear in most people, that once I take a medication, the doctor will ensure I'll take it for life. As you rightly said, Anupama, mental health is a spectrum, and it's such a large spectrum that we understand a lot of things today, but we also don't know a lot of things. So research is coming out more and more, and circumstantially, environmentally, also so many influences, new challenges are coming. So instead of trying to break our head into the research and all, I think I would like everyone to understand one thing: whatever affects your life or whatever is making your functionality low, there is no harm in seeking help. Whether it is your stomach, it's your heart, it's your brain. It's like when I have angina, or even if I have recurrent chest pain, I would not hesitate twice to go to a doctor and say, please rule out heart disease in me. So when I am anxious, when I'm finding I'm not able to sleep, I'm not able to eat, or I'm having too much of rage issues, or I'm getting this feedback from people around me that something is not okay about you. So at least let me apply a filter and go and take help. The other thing people are very scared of is labeling. They feel that एक बार चले गए तो label लग जाएगा, and it's like, oh, once I go. Yeah, no, not really.
Hmm.
Not really. So that inner fear and that stigma is what we have to deal with, because as I said, the brain controls the entire body, our life. So if the brain in whichever form, emotionally, physically has a problem, it has to be handled. And this has a ripple effect on the rest of the family members. So we have to remember that a case with depression or a case with schizophrenia or a case with anxiety disorder or a person who is not able to function, it will not be like the only the person is suffering. It will have a definitely an effect on the entire family. So it makes sense to seek help, isn't it?
Yes, true, true, very true. And I think just taking on from what you were just talking about, I think there's another myth that I mean, on one side, people have this taboo, and then on the other side, there is this thing that, okay, counselor will magically solve the problem. Like, I mean, go to a counselor and it's sorted. And I would, again, based on what you've said, I would understand, as you also spoke about, the systematic approach. I think, I'm sure there is a certain, a systematic approach that's taken, and I'm sure it requires efforts from the side of the patient also. So I was just curious that how do you maintain that balance of maybe pushing like maybe encouraging or pushing the patient, but also maybe sometimes stepping back if needed. So I'm sure it's a challenge. So could you talk a little bit about this approach you take while dealing with your patients on any issue?
Right. So, most of us will follow certain principles in counseling, and especially if you are using CBT as our primary method, it is all about, helping the client to examine their belief system. And we believe in think, feel, and act strategy. So, the most important thing is, as you rightly said, that there is no magic. And that is actually a statement which I make to most of my clients, that I don't have a magic wand. I am just helping you. You are going to do the major job. You have the strength inside you. It is a teamwork. It cannot be like I am sitting, it is not like I have a tablet which I can give you and you are like magically cured. So it's not that you became sick or in just a couple of days. So I always tell them that it is a collaborative effort, it is a team effort. Sometimes we may need to bring in the family also, because maybe there is something they can do to add to that. And it is a to and fro process. And there are sessions where I just let them talk, because they need to vent out, they need to feel they can connect, they need to feel they are being heard. And I mean, a lot of people think, oh, it's just talk therapy and the counselor will just, counseling means, doesn't mean only talking. Actually, as counselors, we are all told that listening is more important than talking. So we have to listen. That then the rapport building is an important aspect. The third aspect is I specifically deal with a lot of homework. If the client is able to understand or write down or give them in points, I give them some homework. It's a, okay, let's make certain goals. These are the sessions broadly we may need, and this is how we are going to deal with it. And these are the goals. I mean, these are the goals as you have said. Do you agree with these goals? So, getting them to be collaborative is usually most helpful. Otherwise, their expectations go haywire. And it's like, for example, in a couple counseling, most often there may be issues in the couple also, both the spouses or predominantly one. So unless and until you try to talk to them and give them some homework, because the homework is very important, because they write it down most of the time or they take points and they share. Because in front of a counselor who has a limited period of time to talk to you, they may not come out openly with many things, and they may go back and say, oh, I remember this. So we have to broadly take it session and session to session. But by the time a couple of sessions are over, as a therapist, I have a broad idea about what I am looking at and where I am heading to. So I think it is very, very important for us to understand or to tell our clients that, these are stages of recovery. So we go from one stage to another. And one big point I want to make here is that, you know, our goals have to be very realistic. Like, I have huge problems, especially in couple counseling, where many a times the end result of the counseling may not be a reconciliation, but a lot of people, they feel that, that all the sessions have to lead to a logical conclusion. The logical conclusion is not what the therapist feels. The logical conclusion is what the partners want. My job is to help them to understand each other, understand their own needs, and then we move with that. So we act more as a facilitator and share our ideas. So I think, Anupama, that is a myth that, counselors can magically cure.
Yes.
I just wish
Yes.
that was true, but that's not practical. And plus,
Yes.
every case is different from another.
True. I think that was very, enlightening. In fact, some of the things you said, like, for example, even earlier when you spoke about how some of these issues are even hereditary. So I wasn't really aware of that. And it makes sense because a lot of times, say, heart issues or other issues are also hereditary. So I'm sure, obviously, it's a part of your body. And even, what you spoke now about being a facilitator, I think that makes so much of sense. And it is important that even we look at it like that, especially because you cannot decide somebody's goal, right, or what they want. I mean, obviously, it is more about for us to help us looking inward, I think. And I think that's great, and I'm sure that has given a perspective to those watching. So before I ask my next question, probably I'll just share a couple of comments. So someone has commented that nice, useful discussion. Thank you. I'm glad you finding this useful. And Jayashri says that someone who had once been in depression always have this feeling that they can go back into depression even though they could be living a hearty life presently. So yeah, I mean, I think she means to say that sometimes even though you might have, like, through therapy, kind of like maybe recovered, come out of it, but there always is this fear of slipping back into the the same hole. So I'm sure, yes, that's definitely a challenge. Now my next question, I think it's very crucial for all of us, because especially off late I've seen a lot of talks on social media about being there for people, listening to them. There are many people, they're well intentioned, I mean, of course everybody feels that yes, we should help, we should do something towards the cause, but I think many of us don't know what are the right things to do or say, maybe. So I just want to understand that, as maybe a close friend or a family member, what are the things that we can keep in mind when we are probably trying to support somebody who is going through any kind of a mental health problem? And if there are certain things which you think which we do or which we say which we should avoid, yeah, maybe please also talk about that. So yeah, whatever you feel like, maybe you can give a few pointers on what we can do, and something which probably we should not at all, like, which is like a complete no. Yeah.
So, Anupama, I'll start with the don't do's one, don't do
Sure.
ones. I think it's very important to not be dismissive when somebody is sharing a problem. So,
Very
they,
important.
first of
Yes.
all, anybody who is going through a mental health issue, I will just call it a mental health issue, not call it any other name, because we all go through at some point of time.
Right.
Like, even as a counselor, sometimes I might feel anxiety. I mean, but then as long as it's not functionally affecting me. So the what we should definitely avoid is to be dismissive and use terms like, ignore it or move on, and divert your mind, look at the other things, because while these are all well-meaning advice, we have the risk of missing out a real and a genuine problem. So a person who may be, like, for example, who may be experiencing transient anxiety, or they may be feeling anxiety related to a job interview, maybe they are able to handle it because they will have other. But suppose somebody has an inherent anxiety disorder, The more you tell them move on, the more they are going to get anxiety because they are not able to come to terms with it and they don't understand. And it is not some, it's a physiological process in them. So we need to understand that not just psychology, in many of the issues, there will be a physiological process also involved. And so I think we, and what are the do's? We should take the cues very, very seriously. And how we take it seriously is that we obviously will observe. See, we have enough time to observe these things. But unfortunately, today in our busy life, we are so occupied with artificial intelligence that we are not looking at the human intelligence. We are not looking at the the emotional intelligence. We are not looking at people. In fact, we talk to more people on screen than real people. So
Yes.
we need to watch out because the person who's living with the person who's suffering would be the right person. Secondly, is be kind and compassionate. See, nobody wants to be sick. Nobody wants to pretend to be sick. There may be a very, very small proportion of people who may be saying it to get attention, but most people, they may fake other things, but most people will not fake mental illness. So I think we should be kind and compassionate. And what they might project as a big problem to them might appear to you as a very insignificant issue. So don't use your lens always to judge the person who is sharing. And do some research. It doesn't harm you to find out a good therapist around you and seek help or suggest. See, that is the basic minimum we should do when we see somebody having an issue. And the last point which I want to make on this question, Anupama, is that reassure them. Like Jayashree just put up a question that, the biggest fear is if I have a problem, will I go back to? If I have a heart problem, can any doctor give me 100% guarantee that I will not go back to that problem? If I have diabetes, will any doctor give me 100% guarantee that your diabetes will not get into hypoglycemia? For every problem associated with our body and mind, there is a convalescence and there is a protocol. So if I have depression, I have been treated for depression, I'm supposed to follow certain things. Like maybe I have to be on medication, maybe I have to change my lifestyle, maybe I have to include and exclude certain things, and maybe I should be reviewed time and again. So there is nothing wrong with that. It's as important as dealing with your heart or your kidney or your liver, actually most important. So I think we should never ever feel going back to a doctor is slipping back. Sometimes to not slip back, also we need to go to a doctor.
Mm. Yes. Yes, that's a very valid point, and I think those are some great suggestions because, like I said, so many of us want to help and support, but like sometimes we make some mistakes unintentionally as well. So it really helps to know, the things we shouldn't be doing and should be doing. And I'm sure the people watching, you've made a note, and keep that in mind because, especially as you also said that we normally have numbers of, say gynecologists or pediatricians. So I always say that why not also have the number of the best counselor or the psychologist in your city. It helps to have that handy so that you can reach out when there's a need. So now what I wanted to understand was that there are many people who normally, in fact, that was also one of the questions I had received from one of my page followers when I had shared about this session, that how do we really know that it is time to seek help? Because I think sometimes people say that it could be just a phase where you're generally feeling low, but not really, probably facing a problem as such. So sometimes people are not sure that what are the signals, maybe that can probably give them some kind of indication that okay, maybe now I should seek help. So if you could just share some thoughts on that.
Even before predicting the pandemic, WHO had said that by 2020, roughly 20% of the population will suffer from mental health issues. which
That's a
means
huge number.
that this there is enough evidence and there is enough research going on to predict this kind of a mental health pandemic which we are not looking at. So because it is not visible, right, it cannot be diagnosed with any serum test, so it needs to be handy. So I think answering your question is that also there is another thing you brought at one point, that in India, uh, the facilities available. So let me just
Hmm.
quote one
Hmm.
thing, that we probably have one mental health doctor for every 1 lakh people. So that is the kind of
Hmm.
proportions we are talking.
Ratio. Right. Right.
Yeah. So I think what can we say, that like this is not something which can be randomly addressed. So could you just repeat the second half of your question, Anupama?
Yeah. So so basically two things if you can talk about. One is that when do we know that that okay, probably now it's time to seek help. Some signals, that was
Yes.
one, and the other thing which you were talking about with respect to the the infrastructure and ecosystem. What do you think all of us can do at our level to kind of better this infrastructure or system? Like, do you think there are small things that all of us can do for the cause of mental health? Yeah, so these are the two things, if you could just one by one address
Yes.
them.
So, how do you know when you need to go to a cardiologist? Let us ask that question to ourselves. We
Mhm.
know when we go to a cardiologist, initially we will not at all go to a cardiologist. We will go to maybe a general physician, and then we'll go to a gastroenterologist, because these are all acceptable diseases in our mind. And before we go even to a heart specialist, okay, I am not suggesting that we should immediately jump and go to the super specialities, but what I am saying is, at least in the urban population, we have enough knowledge to know ki bhai, this could be related, this could be one of the options. Now, when do we need to seek help is when it starts affecting our daily life. It's not like I'm anxious for a week or so. Like in Corona, like among other people, even I was feeling very anxious of stepping out of the house. And if I would see anybody walking towards me without a mask, I would like, is 6 feet right or is it 1 feet right? I mean, so that kind of thing. But somewhere my the way I reason it to myself with my knowledge and my coping mechanisms, I'm able to deal with it. If I'm not able to deal with it, and I'm going through a very very bad time dealing with my anxiety, basically my functionality is affected. That is the time I need to take help. Or if I see somebody who prior to that episode was functional, and over a period of time not being functional, and slowly it is deteriorating, I think that is the time we need to at least suggest that they should seek help. The other thing I wanted to say is that for every mental health issue, there are certain criteria which we cannot take in this session. But like we say, okay, how do you rule out depression? What do you talk about anxiety? So there are some rating things. There are tests, there are rating scales which are administered. So these are evidence based methods to understand whether this is the right time. Sometimes it may not be necessary, but what is the harm? If I have a chest pain, I definitely want to go and get an ECG done. But why can't, if I am not feeling good in my head, why can't at least once I go and figure out? See, ultimately, you will have the choice of whether to continue or not, right? But why deprive ourselves of the opportunity to heal just because we have preconceived notions about what mental health issues are?
Right.
I hope I've answered that question in a
Yes, yes,
broad
yes,
way.
definitely makes a lot of sense. Yes, yes, yeah, yeah. So coming to the other thing that I was asking was that what are the things you feel that all of us can do just to create this better ecosystem and infrastructure around mental health? Because even like you were talking about the ratio, I think that is really disappointing in a way. And so of course, I'm sure the government can do certain things, but yeah, what can we also do as people? Do you think that, talking about this more, or it could be through conversations, maybe workshops, maybe sessions like this also? I think, yes, the more, all of us can do something at our level. So, few practical suggestions from your side, which you think we can do, in our day to day lives at our level. What do you think can help this cause so that we reach, a situation where we can say that, yes, okay, today we have a good infrastructure to support mental health?
A very big question, but a very relevant question, Arupama. I think we need more mental health professionals, and the subject should be treated with the respect it deserves.
Right.
And we need to have more people, because more people. So it is a process. More people getting into the professional also makes it more acceptable in the mind of people, and also the accessibility to mental health improves. When the accessibility to mental health improves, then more and more people are going to reach out. Secondly, I think many programs like your program and many other programs which we also participate in
Right.
destigmatizes the mental health issues. So once we do that, I think people will reach out better ki, oh, I didn't think of it this way, maybe it's not so bad, let me try it out. The third thing is also to not, these should not be restricted to only the urban areas, because remember the larger population is in the rural area. So mental health should not be restricted only to urban areas. I think we definitely are lagging behind, because basic medical health is also lacking in many of the rural areas. But mental health issues, I mean, mental health assistance should be considered as part of help. For example, in dealing with addiction, many governments are also reaching out to the rural areas, like alcoholism and all is a big issue. So I think that is very important. And there is a lot of violence and domestic violence. These are issues which are reality, not just in urban, more in rural also. So creating a framework of help which should not just be limited to urban areas is very, very important. And I think as part of our syllabus, when we take students should be encouraged to participate in some rural programs, because they must understand
Right.
that it is a larger problem. Secondly, thirdly, I think sensitization programs. See, as part of sensitization, we in Hope Trust, not only in addiction but other mental health, we conduct a lot of workshops, we conduct a lot of training programs, internships. We go to schools, colleges, and institutions, and we talk about mental health issues and addiction, and through TV programs. So there are many such people who are doing that. So I think more we talk about the problem, the more we will make it acceptable and reduce the stigma. And also, it will create more interest in the subject. So more and more people will
Yes.
actually want to become a mental health
Right.
expert, because this is going to stay. I think this is the next millennium disease, the mental health issues. And I think networking with mental health professionals and institutions is very important, because many places I know, like for example, cardiac patients who suffer from who have had a bypass. Now we are talking about post-op care. Post-op care necessarily is not medical health; it's also about emotional health. So we have self-help groups for cancer patients. We have self-help groups for dealing with post-op cases of different types. So I think slowly and surely it is going out, but I think this pandemic has made it. I think it's brought it out in its the form it should be seen. So we are watching, and there are, of course, in mental health we are also talking about adolescent mental health. What it is doing, all this screen time, what is it doing? So I think it's a Pandora's box, and
True.
we should keep talking about it, and that is the only way to accept it. There is maybe no
Yes.
cure, but definitely there is treatment available.
True, true, very true. And it's interesting how you initially mentioned about the rural part, because I know that there are many people who think that mental health issues is a very urban thing. there is this mindset that ye to urbanism mein hota hai. So I am very glad you touched upon that it's just that probably people aren't aware, in the rural sector. So I think you made some really interesting points, and we have a viewer question, which is not directly related to the treatment, but she asks that, do you think mental health should be included as a subject in higher studies, like in schools? I mean, so the question is, I think, around whether that would help, maybe for the next generation to be more sensitive towards a cause. So what is your opinion on that?
Absolutely. I think so too. I think in small ways, in many of the schools, it is being done as part of life skills management. So,
Hmm.
schools like in schools, we have life skills as a subject. But
Right.
I feel that while the initiative is fantastic and children are getting to know, especially the higher school children, I think, but we also need to give them, empower the schools and our education system with better professionals. So
Hmm.
the more resource, so the demand and supply has to be handled adequately well. But absolutely, I think life skills is what is we are talking about, and which includes your stress management. It talks about compassion, empathy, conflict resolution. So I completely endorse that view that it should be part of our education system in some way.
Yes, very, very true. So, thank you so much, ma'am. I think this was an absolutely insightful, thought provoking session. And I really feel that, I mean, everybody must watch this session, because, I think you made some really practical points. I think that was a good thing about this session, that a lot of things you spoke about is very practical, things which we can imbibe. And yes, definitely ratio is an issue. So, I hope there are more, good professionals who can really help those who are struggling, and we can get that balance over there. So thank you so much for your time, and I just hope that like Hope Trust keeps doing the great work that it's doing already.
Thank you, Anupama, and wish you all the very best. And
Thank you.
yeah,
Thank you. Yeah, and to the viewers, yeah, thank you so much for joining, for sharing your comments. And Saturday was actually World Mental Health Day, which is why I actually chose this episode to be on the topic of mental health. So yeah, if you have any queries, feel free to share even after the session. The video will be available on my page, and you can reach out to Rajeshwari ma'am. She's from Hope Trust here. It's in Hyderabad, and you can reach out in case you have any questions, or you can book a session if you're struggling with something. Feel free, and I'll see you next week on episode 7 of Vichasthal, and my topic next week is going to be on fertility health, another taboo in India. So Gitanjali Banerjee, who is the founder of Fertility Dost, is going to be in conversation with me. So see you all, and thank you once again, ma'am. Bye.
bye.